Alright guys, I am Credo. We're trying to do a little things different on this show. This is the little brother show, I'm going to call it, to Marked Up, which you can find us on Thursday nights usually on Spreecast, but on Off the Mark, I'm going to try to, get to know you Marks a little bit better. I'm going to try to reach inside your Mark brain, pick it, and just talk about what us Marks love talking about, and that's professional wrestling. And today, I have with me none other than S.O.A.P, the son of a plumber, Josh Hill. Josh, man, welcome.
Thanks, man. Hey, I've been looking forward to this for a while, so it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. So let's get right down into it because I ask the Marks all the time. What made you a Mark? What made you a fan of professional wrestling? Because it's one of a kind thing. You have like fans that are just hardcore about the sport, or they don't care about it. You know what I mean? So you're either one or the other. But you've been around the block. You've been here for a while. You've known professional wrestling. It's been in your life for a long time. So tell everybody. I mean, what got you started into this hobby that has taken over our lives?
Well, I would say, for me, obviously, I go back to mid '80s, what we called the rock and wrestling connection, which basically just took over pop culture at that time. And it's one of those things where I don't know if I can pinpoint an exact moment, when I jumped on, but it was definitely a wave that I caught, and it was something that, being a comic book fan, animated fan, Star Wars geek, I gravitated to those kind of, superhero figures, so, as a kid, you're going into James Way, or, a store like that, Toys R Us, and you see these action figures like the LJN figures, and, you see these characters, these larger than life characters right alongside, Luke Skywalker and Spider-Man. And it's easy to kind of, jump from one to the other. And the next thing you know, you're Saturday morning, you're turning off your cartoons, and at 11 o'clock, here comes, Superstars of Wrestling. And now it's not a cartoon. Now it's seemingly real life. So it was kind of easy to transition from one to the other. I would say that, definitely for me, like 1986 was the prime year for me to jump in, full force in, the build up to WrestleMania 2.
Sure.
Remember very clearly watching the Saturday night's main event when, King Kong Bundy injured Hogan, splashed him seemingly 1,000 times,
Yeah.
and Hogan had to wear this, the tape gimmick around his waist for a few months on every interview that he did.
Definitely.
Leading up. And, it's funny because I think a lot of kids in that time period have a similar story. They showed up for Hulkamania, but stayed for other characters or other wrestlers. For me, the first feud that I really remember just kind of striking a nerve with me was the British Bulldogs versus the Dream Team, which was Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake. They were the champions at the time, and I just remember really digging that whole chase for the tag team belts. The Bulldogs, who seemed young, even though, especially Dynamite Kid, who had been all around the world for years and years, but he felt like a young guy to me. I mean, he was tiny compared to in this
Sure, yeah.
land of giants that was in the Northeast, in the WWF territory. But just seeing them as the underdogs, and building up to this, this in this chase for the belts, and it leading to WrestleMania 2. I was more on the edge of my seat for that than I think I even was for Hogan versus Bundy. I just really wanted to see the payoff from that. And it's almost become the measuring stick for me, even though, looking back, it probably wasn't the most groundbreaking storyline from start to finish, but it was the first of its kind that I had witnessed. So just that emotion behind it, and that sense of excitement just to see, the challengers go from challengers to champion. It definitely left an impact on me, without a doubt.
Sure, yeah. I mean, like, we all go back to that one moment, that one time you saw it on TV, the one time you saw it at a live arena or whatnot, and I think that's where it all starts for all of us, and it's kind of the thing where it either sticks with you or it doesn't, and for us it's stuck with us. We're older now, we're in our 30s, we love watching it. But today's whole wrestling atmosphere, I guess, if you want to call it, it's definitely a lot different. It's definitely more entertainment esque than it was back then. But then again, it wasn't. I mean, it's kind of, there's a lot of similar things. But if you could think about, I mean, stuff going on today compared to back when we grew up watching it. I mean, is there stuff going on that you hate now or that you love, or what's the stuff that, for example, like those things, like what stands out that that make you tune in every week or make you follow it today?
I would say definitely there's parallels, from one era to the next. Definitely a lifeline from one era to the next. As far as things that I like today compared to before, I think that overall, the roster today, whether it's being used properly or not, is far more talented, I guess I would say, overall as performers, as wrestlers. I mean, one thing to bear in mind is, as much as, some of us look back fondly on the days of primetime wrestling, on Monday night, or Superstars of Wrestling. I mean, those were all squash matches, I mean, but at the same time, the idea was that those shows were commercials for you to go to the house shows. So the product is completely different. So it's hard to say if it's even fair to sit there and compare the two. It's just a different environment now. But there's no doubt that when you sit down in front of the TV, you're going to get more bang for the buck that you're not spending, more or less,
Sure.
unless you count your cable bill, your satellite bill, whatever. But beyond that, there's definitely that. I think the thing is that while it's entertainment, the thing that's missing is that even in, some of the matches and feuds, from the 80s and 90s that seemingly didn't maybe matter, quote unquote, in the long run, at least there was a sense of, okay, well, these guys will be in the mid-card feud or a lower card feud. And then if that catches on, they can build up and go for the Intercontinental title or even eventually make it to the world title. Now I feel like everyone that's on Raw and SmackDown, they're where they are.
Yeah.
And they're maybe never going to leave that part of the card unless something drastically changes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a few guys that are ascending. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, we're watching it happen with the Shield. There's a chance for Cesaro, but beyond that, you almost feel like, like somebody like Kofi Kingston, he's already gone where he's going to go.
Sure.
In the WWE. Whereas before, you could watch somebody like Shawn Michaels go from tag team to Intercontinental to world title, even somebody like Davey Boy Smith. I mean, you watched him go from tag team champion to Intercontinental champion. And even though he never made it to the world title, he at least was in main event feuds where he was challenging for that belt. So then he made it to the upper card. You just don't see that progression like you used to. And I think that's something that's really missing for me.
Sure. I think right now we're going to jump around time-wise from then and now and all that. And right now the biggest thing going on today is CM Punk. I got to get your thoughts on this. I know we've talked in the group about it. That's facebook.com/group/pro wrestling marks if you're listening. But I know everybody's got their opinions on it. But let's hear yours right now on this whole situation, because I said on Marked Up on Thursday, I was, I kind of said it, kind of resembles almost the Stone Cold Steve Austin, what he did in 2002, where he stepped away because he didn't like what was going on with the writing of, with the writers and all that stuff. And technically, this is, I think, I could be wrong, but this is probably the first time it's happened since maybe Stone Cold doing it. Walking away just like that. But what are your thoughts on this whole situation? Real? Is it a work? What's happening?
It's one of those things. Like even like now we're about a week or so removed from it, maybe more now. It's tough because I think if you had asked me like the day it hit, you'd probably get a much different answer than you're about to get now, because it's easy to get wrapped up in just the emotion behind it. Because look, CM Punk as a performer, as a character, means a lot to people who are his fans. I mean, for me, again, we're talking about how far I go back as a fan, but I took a break around 2007 from watching and didn't come back till 2011 when one of my friends on Facebook posted the YouTube clip of the pipe bomb, quote unquote, and I saw that and I felt like, okay, here's somebody who's trying to make it fun again and trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
This is clearly not, wasn't scripted entirely anyway, and was trying to just infect change. And I was like, okay, I want to take a look again. And it brought me back in. So, I definitely view Punk as, the modern gateway for me as a fan to come back after several years of, when I did take a break. I mean, it's for something that I have as much of a passion for as wrestling. Again, for that to have been accomplished, I mean, that means a lot to me just as a fan. I mean, I'm definitely a huge fan of Punk. The way I look at it is pretty simple. We don't know what really has gone on. Mm-hmm. Not yet.
Yeah.
Will we ever? I don't even know.
Yeah.
I think that there's no doubt that he needs time off. It's a shame that it's happening now.
Yeah.
When we're building up to WrestleMania. We've heard different things, him feeling that a match with Triple H wasn't big enough in his mind or wasn't what he wanted. My opinion, I actually thought that it made a lot of sense. I felt that it was, in a way, a payoff for what was started only, just a few years ago, going back to that pipe bomb,
mm-hmm.
because that was really the story, was Punk versus Hunter in reality.
Yeah.
And we never really saw the right payoff between the two of them. I mean, they had a match, a couple months into that, and Hunter just beat him, and it never mattered, beyond that. It just kind of died right there. And, and it happened just at a random pay-per-view. I mean, this was happening at WrestleMania.
Sure.
If they were going to do this. And I was actually really looking forward to it. So that I'm disappointed in, to see that most likely isn't going to happen here. I think that ultimately, if he needs his time off, that he should just take his time off. And you're talking about a guy that, apparently doesn't take any painkillers, doesn't go to the hospital, so he's going to be a lot more banged up physically and emotionally. So, if this is what it takes to have him be able to come back and perform at a higher level at a later date, at the end of the day, I'm on board with it. It is what it is.
Sure. I mean, WrestleMania is literally weeks away now, because we're in 2014, and that's like the biggest payday. Regardless of how banged up you are, wouldn't you want to just at least wait till then? But I mean, like, I know there's so many variables within that. But I mean, all in all, if I had to do it, wouldn't you think you'd at least wait till just a few more weeks to get through that? But I mean, that's why it's such like a real situation to where, he's really pissed off at somebody, or
I agree. I mean, I think that's what a lot of people, even the people that are, quote unquote, on his side in this scenario, are feeling like, man, that's a huge payday to walk away from. At the same time, for a guy of Punk's credibility and, values, he just maybe views as the money isn't worth it.
Yeah.
He's already got all the money that he's going to need. I mean, seems to be pretty smart with his money.
Sure.
He doesn't waste it. In comparison to maybe some other guys. I mean, he could walk away tomorrow and be fine. The shame of it is that if you look at the history of wrestling, the age that he's at in his early to mid 30s, whatever he's at right now, in that time frame, I don't know the exact number, but those are your prime money making years.
Yeah.
You've ascended to the level that he's at, if you're going to reach it, and this is where you make the really big bucks. And to miss out on that, is a real shame, and in some respects could affect his overall legacy, when we look back 10, 20 years from now, or however many years. I would definitely, in an ideal world, he'd be in WrestleMania this year, and he'd be either wrestling Hunter or whoever's got the title. Either way, that would be my guess. But again, if
Sure.
this is what he thinks he needs, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
Because I can, for me, I think a lot of it is that, as crazy as it sounds, as a fan, you do start to really care about these guys as performers. Mm-hmm. I talked about, not watching from 2007 on, and a lot of that had to do with just outright just kind of being heartbroken between Eddie Guerrero dying and then seeing what happened with Chris Benoit. I mean, that was tough to watch. Eddie was, I mean, Eddie to this day is still, one of my all-time favorites without a doubt. I have so much love and respect for that guy and what he did. And it was really hard when he passed for me
Sure,
as a
yeah, and that's the thing, because like as a mark, we get invested in this. It's not just, oh, we're putting on a show, and at the end of the show, that's it. This is, I feel like, the never-ending show, because it's not like you're putting on a movie and in 2 hours that's it. And that's it. You know what I mean? We're waiting for the sequel. Every week it's a new show. Every week they keep progressing, and it's the never-ending show. And you get invested with these characters. You become fans. You become marks.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. When something tragic like that happens, it's like your idol or somebody dies like that. It makes you want to walk away. And even bringing back CM Punk into this, granted, but he didn't pass away, but he
Right.
left it. He's also leaving a lot of fans who are just there to see him. A lot of people could care less about a lot of these other guys. They're there just for Punk. And I mean, that's why I've been reading, at least from what we see, that that's why one reason Vince McMahon wants him back there, because he has a large fan base, and regardless of what you think of him, that's that'll help bring in fans, money. I think he's the number two guy behind Cena with merchandise sales too, and that says a lot. And there's just so many things going on with that whole situation. It's really hard to see what will happen. It's one of those things we just gotta wait, and find out the deal, I guess. But
Yeah, there's no doubt that he is, in that company, no doubt the number two guy. I mean, you can clearly see it. If you have internet access, you know it. It's true. There's no denying it. And if you go to a live show, you know that it's true, because you know what, the merchandise. You know what, one to me, one thing that's always been clear that that somebody is over is if you go to a show and you see guys dressed up as whatever their favorite wrestler is. You don't just do that for fun,
yeah,
and nobody's getting dressed up like the great Khali. All respect to that
yeah,
guy. Nobody's dressing up like Khali. Nobody's dressing up like Hornswoggle. They're dressing up like Punk. They're either dressing up like Punk or Cena or Jeff Hardy, or you know what I mean?
yep,
And that's when somebody has a real connection. And that's when that's a guy that you got to have on TV. And Vince, no matter what you want to say or think about that man, he knows it too. He
oh
knows
yeah,
it's true. Otherwise, there's nobody that could have walked out on that stage in Vegas that year, said what he said, and not been told to hit the road
yeah.
if Vince didn't know that guy had value. He knew that guy was money right then and there. And that's why he's been stuck. That's why he's stuck around. That's why he had a match with Undertaker last year at Mania, which is, the truth be told, is just about as important as any other match on that card. And that's why Vince will continue to try to get him to come back now.
So let me ask you this then: put yourself in CM Punk's shoes for this question, to where, okay, you had the championship for 434 days. You were the number one guy, but technically you weren't booked in the main event. If you look at some of the pay-per-views where he was champion, Cena was still in the main event. He wasn't being booked as the top guy. And then also, okay, you have it for this long, to lose the belt to a part-time player, I should say, The Rock. And granted, we all know why he did it, and for it's best for business. He had money, and granted, I'll tell you right now, Rock is definitely a bigger superstar than Batista is. We'll get into that later. But okay, you had the belt for that long. You jobbed to The Rock once at the Rumble. You jobbed to The Rock twice at the Elimination Chamber. Now you're jobbing to Cena on Raw, which was one of the best matches of the year, I should add. And then then you have a great match with Taker at WrestleMania. And now throughout the year, he's pretty much like I guess a special attraction, to where he fought Lesnar. He was in all those other matches, but he wasn't in like the main event matches anymore. He had, he jobbed for those guys. And I'm sorry, I'll mark out a little bit, but he laid down for The Rock to come back into the company for 2 months, to have the belt, to give you a new championship, to give it back to Cena, whatever. But you know what I mean? For doing that, to come back to this year, full circle, back to my question before I get off track, now think of that's what you've been through in the last year, right? You did that for the company. Now they tell you, the Royal Rumble. Okay, you're number one. You last pretty much the whole Rumble, and now you get tossed. Batista comes in 1 week ago, wins the Rumble. Now he headlines Mania. Meanwhile, Punk did all this stuff. He doesn't even get a chance to be in the main event. And now from at least what we heard, there would have been a match Punk versus Triple H at Mania. I mean, I'm pissed off just listening to it. I mean, he's the guy that's always around. He's the guy that's pulling in the money. He's, like I said, he's number two selling merchandise. Now, for you, as CM Punk, we'll get back on topic to where that happened to you. How do you feel going into, the Rumble and this happening with Batista? I mean, put yourself as Punk. Like, how do you feel about that whole situation if you were CM Punk? I mean,
I think that it's, it almost is similar in a sense to how he felt, in 2011 when the main event was Cena versus The Miz. Punk at that point felt that he was the number one heel in the company. Mm-hmm. So why shouldn't he be in the main event taking on the number one hero, which was Cena? Yeah. He felt that at that point, the belt should be on him, even if he had to drop the belt at WrestleMania to Cena. I don't think he cares, win or lose. It's all about how he's being showcased. I think a lot of probably what he did this past year, I think he was okay with overall, being in the mix with the Shield a lot and, losing to Lesnar at SummerSlam. I think he knew going into it that he was going to job to The Rock when the time came. Whether he was happy about it is another story. But I think what you're saying is you're hitting the nail on the head is that he did all of those things that I think he gladly did.
Sure, yeah, and he's not getting rewarded for it.
He's not getting rewarded in the right way. I don't think it's tough because I think it would be a different story if someone other than Batista, whether it was Punk or not, won that Royal Rumble. I think he would have been okay, obviously, with Daniel Bryan winning it. I think he would have been okay with a lot of other guys winning it. But right, his viewpoint is why should Batista, just walk in and win that and win the Rumble, guaranteeing him a WrestleMania main event when Batista as a character, this is, a character, not as a person, not as a performer, because from all things that I've seen and read, Punk actually likes Batista as a coworker, quote unquote. But, I think it's clear to all of us is that Batista doesn't have a connection with the fans. No one really wants to see him in this position that he's in and leading up to this, this main event match with Randy Orton. There's no drama to that, and there's no excitement behind that, and those two guys clearly have no chemistry between the two of them. When they've been in the ring every time since Batista came back, it's like you can hear the crickets chirping. The thing is that on the other side of it, supposedly the ratings did take a little bit of a spike when Batista came back that week, but that was 1 week, and that's the way I always look at this stuff, like with The Rock and these guys that are part-timers coming back. Yeah, they spike the ratings, but what do they do for the months when they're not there?
Yeah.
They're not making, they should be there to help make other guys.
That's what Chris Jericho said. I mean, he came back, he put over so many people, including Punk, at Mania, and he had no problem with it. He knows what, the thing is, and I don't know, it just bothers me, I guess, that, it's these guys that come in, and that's where the fans are getting so heated now. And that, that's what they're realizing, because you saw them boo the crap out of Batista. You saw them even boo the crap out of Rey Mysterio at number 30, because deep down inside, all those marks were hoping that it would be Daniel Bryan, and then they knew they just, it was one of the Rumbles where it was like really no surprises. I mean, okay, Kevin Nash, again, that was a bigger surprise 2 years ago when it happened, but not now. And I mean, it's just like the fans are starting to finally speak up a little bit, and I'll tell you what right now, if nothing changed and it was Batista versus Orton at WrestleMania and that was your last match, if 80,000 people got up and left, that would be epic on live TV. Or just, I mean, I was at Mania last year, and just them booing Cena, hearing 80,000 people boo him, it was amazing. And I couldn't imagine what the crowd would sound like this year if Daniel Bryan doesn't win that championship. I'm sorry, he's not even in the championship match, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
the fans are finally starting to speak up.
Yeah, I think there will be people, even if he's not announced to be in that match. I think there will be people tuning into that pay per view, hoping right up until like the 11th hour that Vince walks out right before the match starts and comes up with some cockamamie excuse for why Daniel Bryan is suddenly in the match,
Yeah.
and then he'll walk out at the end with the title. I think that's how bad people want to see that happen.
Yeah.
It's definitely a frustrating time, and it's a good time, like you're saying, for fans to definitely speak up. I will say that even in the case of I mean, even they were even better off in the case of Cena versus Rock, because at least there was some sense of real drama behind that match.
Yeah.
Between these two guys,
And
and
like, yeah, and like, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I mean, like,
no,
I have to say this, but like, The Rock versus Batista. The Rock is much more of a high caliber star today than Batista is. Granted, I mean, Rock is even bigger movie star than Hogan was ever. He's probably the only wrestler that's ever been in so many blockbusters than anybody. And granted, him in the main event of Mania, I get it, I understand. Maybe I didn't like it, but I get that because he was a big caliber star. You bring in Batista because he has a freaking Marvel movie coming out in August, and I'm sorry for Marvel fans out there. I'm a big Marvel fan, but Guardians of the Galaxy is not going to bring in the same kind of money that Avengers did or any other Marvel movie. Right now, to me, Guardians of the Galaxy is going to be a B movie for them. It's going to be the first B Marvel movie, and there's no interest in it. I'll go see it. But I mean, you know what I mean. It's not going to be an opening night like Avengers was. But
yeah, I mean, you know me. I mean, I mean, how hardcore I'm in the comic books, and I can even tell you that. Look, I've definitely enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy. Not to get too far off from wrestling, but my thing with that movie is that's a big gamble for Marvel on their own. So for WWE to turn around and say, "Oh well, Batista's in a Marvel movie," it's not the same situation. It ain't like he's playing the bad guy in the Avengers, like you're saying.
yeah,
It's not. It's not on the same level. That movie could easily just come and go in the blink of an eye. It won't matter what whose name is on the credits. And I don't think, and at that point, what, WrestleMania is already over. So my thing is that if that movie is coming out in August, why didn't they just save him until SummerSlam?
I know.
And that to me would make more sense than anything, because then the movie actually comes out a few weeks before SummerSlam. So now you'd have people just like, that's fresh in their minds. That, they went to this movie, and let's say that the movie is like gangbusters. Let's say it's awesome, which I hope it is. And now you realize, oh man, this guy that plays this kick-ass character in this action movie, this crazy sci-fi action movie, he's going to be wrestling again at SummerSlam versus I don't care who, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
At least there's a little interest. But now nobody's going to even care. Now, if anything, people are going to go to see that movie and say, oh, look, it's the guy that bombed at WrestleMania this year when everyone booed him out of the arena.
Yep, and I think Damian Stalter from the group said that I haven't read the comic book of Guardians of the Galaxy, but his character only just grunts in the comic book, so I'm not sure how much a speaking part he has, but we shall see. And that's the whole thing too, is with his Mania. With his Rumble return. The week before, like it was leaked on the dirt sheets and all that. And granted, okay, all the smarks, the marks out there knew that Batista would have returned because I think they advertised him returning at wherever.
Right.
So they're like, "Oh, Batista signs, he's back," and maybe WWE was like, "Oh, maybe we should cap this and just bring him on already." And I think they lost out on that to where they could have had him as a surprise entrant. Granted, maybe we knew about it. It would have still been a surprise, you know what I mean? And that would have probably had more impact and probably put him over more as a face than a heel. Because when he came back and then won the Rumble, he doesn't need to win the champion. He doesn't need to be in the championship match. He doesn't need to be in the Mania match. I don't know. That's why I think it's pissing a lot of people off. Where we go back to the thing on topic with Punk, I have nothing wrong with Batista coming in. I don't even hate him.
No.
But you know what I mean? Like the thing is coming back to go in the main event, the championship match when guys like Daniel Bryan are so freaking over, yes is written everywhere. I just want to take a magic marker and write it on Triple H's forehead and be like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The only thing I could see them doing is like, okay, we'll hold off and keep it a WrestleMania moment to where he wins and you get like 80,000 fans chanting yes, fine. And if they had to stretch for that till Mania, I get it. But you could have had Daniel Bryan win the Rumble. And then, hell, put the freaking belt on Lesnar. And then you could have, like, David versus Goliath, build up Lesnar as a freaking crazy guy for a few months and then have Daniel Bryan win it then. There's so many booking ways.
That's exactly the match that I wanted. That was what I thought made the most sense. And in a lot of ways, it looked like that was sort of where they were going. Because when Lesnar showed back up recently, I mean, in his first appearance, they made it clear he wants to be the champion. This is what he wants. And so to me, that was perfect. And when he walked out and shook hands with Hunter, well, there you go. It's easy. It's booking 101 right there.
I know.
Who's the guy who's the baby face that has had the most issues with Hunter this whole year? Daniel Bryan. Okay. Now you've got Hunter who had issues with Lesnar, but now they're working together. And Lesnar is just like this giant monster that's working for, I don't know, what do they call them? The Authority or whatever they are, whatever they're supposed to be, the company. And, there's a great main event with a lot of different dimensions to that whole story that would have just been awesome. And, and like you said, David, it's a simple story, David versus Goliath. You can't get any better than that. And plus you got two guys that even though, again, it's still not even a traditional little guy versus big guy because you've got Daniel Bryan who, truth be told, could probably stretch anybody in wrestling tomorrow. You know what I mean? If you put him in the ring for real with someone, he could probably make almost anyone tap out.
Yeah.
If it was, if we're in a legit fight. But against, Lesnar, who obviously has a legit UFC background. I mean, it's not just a matter of a little guy running away from a big guy. I mean, there's a lot of different, ways that they could take that match. I think it would have been really cool. It's a shame that's not the match we're getting, apparently.
I know. Let's even talk about like we talked about old versus new. I mean, back then, guys would hold on to the belts for years and a long time because, it was one show. It was on like once in a while. Not like today where you're force-fed Raw on Monday. Then they tape SmackDown on Tuesday. Then you got main event Wednesday. And then you got, SmackDown airs Friday. But then they even had that Saturday morning show. And then that's not even counting like TNA if you're a fan and watch that, or if you watch Ring of Honor online, or all the other shows. There's so much wrestling today that almost the stories get watered down because all they're doing is just trying to get all these shows on TV, and it's sad to where I don't know where they get these writers today because, I mean, there's been stupid storylines to where it was Undertaker versus Triple H again, and they only said it was the second time facing him. Meanwhile, we all knew that this was the third time at WrestleMania he's fighting him.
Right.
And it's little things like that bother me. Granted, okay, 10-year-old Jimmy down the street who just turned on wrestling and is seeing this has no idea. But you know what? If he becomes a fan and starts looking back on everything, he's going to see it. And it's the continuity today that, it blows my mind to wherever who's writing the stuff. Get somebody else. I mean, hire us. At least we know what we're talking about. You know what I mean? Granted, I'm not a writer for TV, but I'll tell you what. If I was writing a promo for Triple H versus The Undertaker, I would at least mention that they fought twice. You know what I'm saying?
I think a lot of that, I think the truth be told is, I hate to say it, but I think it comes down to Vince. I think that they probably have a lot of guys backstage that feel the same exact way.
Yeah.
And I've been watching long enough. I know Vince, like I know what his blueprint is. You know what I mean? Yeah. And to me, like that kind of stuff has Vince all over it. Just not acknowledging history. Only when he feels like it's necessary. Yeah. And there's been a lot. I mean, we could be here forever with the amount of matches that I've seen over the years that I'm like, why wouldn't you bring this up and why wouldn't you bring that up? Because it would only add to the story. Why ignore it? And I mean, especially you're talking about Taker versus Hunter. I mean, my God, to me, one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time, in my opinion, was WrestleMania X7, which was Taker versus Hunter, I mean, to me, that match, just from the entrances alone, with Hunter coming out to, Motorhead playing live, him walking down the ring just to build up to that, and Undertaker when he was in the biker gimmick and he actually got to like rev that bike up and race down to the ring, and it just started like the bell hadn't even rung and they were just going at it and they're up in the crowd and everything. I mean, that to me, that match destroyed what they even did just the past couple of years. I mean, just that match alone. And then to not even acknowledge that and use that as a basis for a storyline it's absurd. But I think I really, it's easy to say that, whoever they got working backstage is just, doesn't get it or whatever. And I think like I've heard you say many times, there's like a lot of yes men.
Yes, and they're afraid to speak up to the boss. And don't get me wrong, if you put me in the room with Vince McMahon, I probably wouldn't say half the stuff I'm saying now because I don't want to be a jerk. But I'll tell you, when it comes down to it, if it was, because I'm a mark. I really not believe in this stuff, but I love it so much that I would have to be straight up with him, and that's you can't be a yes man to where he says, we're going to do this. And, you have to kind of be like, well, Vince, I love you and everything, but I mean, they're not going to get it. And I think I've said it before too, to where he's in his grumpy old man stage. And I'm sorry, it's probably going to happen to me. It'll happen to other people, but you get to that old age to where okay, granted he created it all and this and that, but it's 2014, Vince. Things change. People, it's not the same world anymore in a way. And you just kind of have to speak up and say what you believe in, because a lot of the writers they hire today, maybe they have a good story and then he comes along and doesn't like it and changes it, but you got to be like, I'm sorry, what you're changing doesn't make sense to what we're doing. You know what I mean? And I granted it's his baby, and if it was my World Wrestling Federation, I would be the same. And I'm saying the F word, the Federation.
I agree.
But you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. And when you're working there, maybe one day I'll work, but as soon as he hears this, I probably won't. But I mean, if I'm there, maybe the first few weeks I'll be like, okay, I'll do it your way. Okay, I'll do it your way. But there's that, it gets to that one point where what you're doing, it just doesn't make sense anymore, and you can't just always be that yes man to where you're just pleasing your boss by doing what he wants. Like, you gotta tell him that this isn't good. This is, but just by the reactions, like we were talking about, it's, the fans are starting to turn on your own product, and, you got a big network coming out. You kind of want them to stick around and buy it. You know what I'm saying? So
that's the thing that blows me away, is that you've got this network coming up. Why would you not, especially right now, pander to the hardcore fans?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The real, serious, dyed-in-the-wool guys that are, not going to stop watching, because those are the ones that, they're not going to stop watching, but they might not necessarily drop down $10 a month.
Yeah.
If they don't think it's worth it. There's days that I question it right now, because it's like, what, why, if I'm down on the product right now, why would I want to spend another $10 a month to watch, I already have a lot of the old stuff on DVD that I want to see anyway.
I know.
So, and again, if I'm giving you $10 a month, that's telling you that I'm overall satisfied as a customer, and I'm not.
Yeah.
It's a shame that the direction is going. And I think with Vince, to get back onto that, I think it's a lot of it has to do, from what we've read and what we've seen, I think it has to do with your place in the company. I think there's only certain people that can challenge him. And I think he likes to be challenged, because if you look at the guys that have succeeded between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin, and even to a degree Hunter at a certain point in his career, the list goes on. These are guys that at one point or another, I'm sure, told Vince, well, look, I'm not going to do it this way, or I'm not going to do it that way, or this is what we think, this is how you should do it.
Yeah.
And that's where they, Mick Foley, very similar. And sometimes that backfires, depends on how far you take it. I think they probably have, certain moments where it works and where it doesn't. But, you at a certain point, somebody has to tell them, look, it has to be different. And if anybody backstage isn't going to do it, well, then we have to as fans. And it's like I've said before, you have to hit them, where it hurts. And that's ultimately in their wallet. You have to be careful what you spend your money on, with them, what you support and what you don't. And as you know, as annoying as all the talk about the WWE app and follow this on Twitter and tell us on Twitter this hashtag blah 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 blah. Well, that's the line of communication that they're giving you. So that's where you have to speak up and say, you know, we want this or we want that. You know,
But it's so hard, Josh. It's so hard. I want to buy everything. I want, you know, and like we've all talked. Everybody's like, "Oh, boycott Raw." Well, I'm going to DVR it. Well, you know what? I still watched it because I had to see it live. Raw is like the one show I got to see live, and love it or hate it. I can't just turn the channel when I don't like something. I mean, I'm still invested in it. And you know that's the thing where they get you because I'm invested in it, and
right.
You know,
it's tough because if you think about it, think about every other TV show that you watch. And if any of those shows that you watched were this bad week after week, you would not be watching them anymore.
I wouldn't.
But you continue to watch wrestling, and I continue to watch wrestling. Like you said, it's just in us. It's just a part of us. It's hard. It's hard to walk away. And I'm not even saying to not watch it anymore. But what I'm saying is that then you have to also participate in the communication. You know what I mean? And that's part of it is going to the shows and speaking out. And you know, of course, you know, we heard some rumors about people being kicked out of the arena. I kind of doubt that happened, but you know, there's signs that you can, wave in front of the camera or whatever. Again, taking to Twitter, taking to Facebook, and just letting them know that's the best way to do it. And I think they know. And in this case, again, we're going full circle. We're coming back to Punk. They know.
Yeah.
And it will happen. Look at all the guys that have come back.
Exactly, and I mean, could you imagine if there was Facebook and Twitter in the '80s, like everybody bashing? Like, do you think we would have been able to change anything back then? You know, because you know how mainstream it is now, just talking on Facebook and Twitter, and I think without calling a hotline to figure out what happens.
Yeah, no, I think. You know, it was definitely a different time, but I think they were aware of it too. I think it all was a matter of who had the most stroke. You know, yeah. I mean, look, we talk about Hulkamania and how huge it was and how long it lasted. The truth is that, in my opinion, Hulkamania really fell apart after WrestleMania 3. And I hate to make anybody upset when I say that, but that's the truth because it reached its apex with that match between Hogan and Andre, and from there, it just. Everybody saw what they wanted to see out of him. For the most part, you had fans that still loved him. I liked Hogan even after that. The truth was, that was it. I mean, he beat the biggest guy in the world. There was nowhere else to go from there.
Yeah. And
the fans were ready beyond that to see Randy Savage or anybody else with the title. And then, you know, when, you know, of course, once Randy had it, things were good. I don't know, you know, I've heard that, you know, house show attendance was down and all this stuff. And, you know, to me, it's the same thing like that goes on today. You know, oh, well, we put Daniel Bryan in the main event for the pay-per-views and the pay-per-view buy rates went down. Well, yeah, you know, of course, because the guys started.
I have to argue at that point, though, because when he did that, I have to stop you because that's when the NFL started. And if there's any bigger marks out in the world, it's football marks. And I'm sorry, if you like football or wrestling, there's a time where the football... You know, I personally don't, but I know there's, you know, football takes over. And that's the thing. They always do that. Somebody was talking about this a while ago to where, you know, those months, like when football starts and stuff, that's where, like when they gave Daniel Bryan a chance and this and that, and they saw that the ratings weren't good. And I was like, come on. And there's this whole thing about it. I don't want to get too much into it, but that was just me. I had to cut you off on that.
No, I agree. And then, we could go in deep on that one. I mean, that whole program was set up to fail from the start because that was the worst booked main event angle in a long time, in my opinion, because you just too many repetitive matches and too many screw job finishes, and of course it wasn't working because you couldn't. And I think that's what it comes down to when we're talking about continuity. The fans cannot trust the product right now.
Yeah.
Even when we have these little glimmers of hope, we still don't feel like it's going to stick.
Yep.
And that's what you have to rebuild. You have to gain the trust of the fans again if you ever want to see any performer, it doesn't have to be Daniel Bryan, anybody, to truly succeed as the number one guy. We have to believe that Vince and Hunter and Steph or whoever else, you know, makes the decisions backstage, that they are going to be in it for the long haul. And that's the problem right now.
Sure. Man, we talked about a lot of things today on Off the Mark, and we get fired up, and that's what's the great about it. That's what's great about being a fan of professional wrestling. I mean, we talked about the past, we talked about the present. Anything, I mean, anything today that you wish would come back, maybe, or something that they would focus on more as a fan of the old school, I would say. Something that you don't see today that you wish you kind of did, or what?
Yeah, I mean, hitting back on what we talked about earlier, I think just a little more sense of, progression that you could watch, that you could jump on board with somebody who just walked in, like let's look at that guy that came into the Rumble a couple weeks ago, Rusev, right? Alexander Rusev. Just imagine, like, if you really felt as a fan, okay, this guy just came into the Rumble. Maybe we're going to watch him progress, maybe we're going to see him start off, going after the US title or the Intercontinental title or whatever. Maybe he's going to get a tag partner, and we're going to watch that early part of his career and then watch him blow up from there and eventually reach maybe reach the world title if he's that good.
Yeah.
We don't have that much anymore. I mean, granted, maybe we're seeing a little bit of that with the Shield right now, but even that, there's a fear of them just taking Roman Reigns and hot-shotting him right to the world title.
Yeah.
Because you keep hearing, oh, they love Roman Reigns and they're so high on him. That guy ain't ready. I'm sorry. I don't care what anybody says. He is not ready. He's awesome, and he's got a lot of potential, and he probably should at some point become world champion. But it ain't the time. It ain't right now, because all that's going to happen is that he's going to be another Batista, or he's going to be another, whoever else has come around in the past however many years, Bobby Lashley, and these guys that they just throw a world title on and they say, well, that's what we did with Hogan. He showed up one week and, he threw the Wild Samoans out, out of the ring or whatever. And then he walked into Madison Square Garden and beat Iron Sheik and it was off and running. No, that's not true. That's not how it happened, because you're forgetting about all those months and years that he was in AWA before that. And then when he was in WWF as a heel, and all that history that built up to that point. Hulkamania did not start, in 1984. There were several years before that all built up right to that moment. That's why it was as huge as it was, because there was a lead into it. You can't just turn Roman Reigns baby face tomorrow, throw the belt on him, and the fans are going to say, yeah, that's cool.
And that's the thing. That's like some of the guys, at least, it's all about like paying your dues in a way. I mean, granted, okay, Daniel Bryan hasn't been there for 10 years, but he's been there for about 5 years or so, I'll tell you that. Granted, Dolph Ziggler hasn't been there for a while, but he started off young, the whole cheerleading gimmick and all that, and then he worked his way up, and, it was kind of sad to see him fall off when he had that world title shot. But, I mean, a lot of the guys, you have to work with them a while. Roman Reigns, I still think, like you said, he just came in. Let him develop his character more. He's still in the Shield character. Let him go solo, and let him, you got to work your way from the bottom to the top, and that's what we could talk a whole other show about with championship belts, to where, give him the U.S. title, let him run with that for a little bit. Give him the IC belt, let him run with that for a little bit, Like, he doesn't need to be a world champion right now. You have guys like CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, you have guys at the top already that can stay there for a little bit, and you don't need to rush it. And like you said, when you rush it, things fall apart fast. And
right, and we're invested in those characters.
Yeah.
Those performers as characters, we're invested in them. Whether you watched CM Punk in his indie matches, which I never did. The first time I ever watched CM Punk wrestle was the night he came out on the new ECW and wrestled Just Incredible. That was my first CM Punk match that I ever watched, and I saw that and I said, this guy's going to be big in this company, whether they want him to be or not. He will get to the top. And however many years later, that's exactly what came to pass. And same thing with Daniel Bryan. And there's a guy that you've watched, even though in this short period of time, you watched him go from the NXT, the original NXT, up through the US title, tag title, all this, and now to this point. That's a natural progression for a character. And whether we're talking wrestling or we're talking Breaking Bad or The Young and the Restless, characters go through, they go through a progression from start to finish. And you can't just throw somebody out there and say, this is the level we want them to get to, so this is the level we're going to start them out at. That's, to me, that's a big part of why somebody like Alberto Del Rio hasn't done hasn't connected with the fans like they hoped he would as a heel or a face. They threw him right in, and what
Yep.
he won the Royal Rumble right away,
That's
and then
it.
he's in the main event at Mania in his first Mania. I mean, that's crazy. There's no way.
I know you got to let the character sit and baste for a while. You know, you got to let him like. Granted, he's not going to be something great when he starts out, but when he starts getting comfortable doing what he does, you know, like you said, like they shoved him down our throats and we weren't ready for him and we didn't really care for him, and now he's stuck in that limbo of, you know, what do we do with him kind of thing, and he's probably the next guy who's going to leave because he's
going to leave anyway. No, and he's going to look. And he's smart because, look, he's an older guy. He's already made a bunch of money. He's done everything that he can do. I mean, what's he going to go back and become the Intercontinental Champion and, you know, go backwards? That's not going to happen. So all he's going to do is go back to Mexico as a conquering hero. And anyone knows, if you're a Lucha Libre fan, you know that anybody, whether you're an absolute failure or not, if you come to the U.S. and you become a prominent character on, you know, WWE TV or, you know, back in the day, WCW or whatever, it doesn't matter what you did. You go back, you're a conquering hero, and you're even in a better spot than you were when you left.
Sure.
So he's just going to go back and he'll work a limited schedule and continue to make money. And who can blame him? Because now all he's doing now, he's just going to be fed to Batista. Why?
Yep.
You know, what does that say about all those accomplishments that he made? You know, if he won the Royal Rumble and he won the world title a couple times and the WWE title and all this, and then you just let a guy that's a part-timer walk in and just walk all over him, like, what does that say about those accomplishments, that they really didn't mean anything? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't say much about that performer if somebody else can just walk in and destroy them.
Yeah,
you know?
Yep. And that's our cue to.
You heard the crickets chirping.
I think we're starting to lose our audience right now, Josh. But no, but in all seriousness, I mean, we've talked a lot, and like that's what marks do. That's what, you know, we could start with one topic and then it just snowballs all the way through to who knows what. And that's what's great about what I'm doing right now, is because I want to try to get one-on-one conversations with you guys. And aside from doing marked up and talking in the group to where, you know, you can't really write a whole freaking encyclopedia about what you want to express. So I'll try to get you guys on here individually. Like Josh joined me today, and we had the woes on earlier. But I mean, Josh, anything else? This is where we're going to wrap up. Anything you want to maybe state before we finish? Anything that we didn't talk about that maybe you want to touch on real quick before we end this?
You know, I guess the one thing that kind of sticks in my mind a lot when I just think about the current state of wrestling is, it seems like one of the biggest complaints that, you know, we always hear from the fans is, you know, the PG era, and that we're in the PG era. And, you know, bear in mind that a lot of us, when we started watching, we were kids.
Yep.
You know, and the product needs to be accessible for kids. Doesn't mean it needs to be watered down. And the fact that it's PG is not the reason why the product has the trouble that it has. I mean, the reality is that the Attitude Era, as great as it was still about how great those performers were. And they would have excelled no matter when it was. Austin did not need to, you know, raise two middle fingers in the air to get over. Yeah, it helped. It made him look awesome. And that's great. But that guy was super talented, and he would have thrived no matter what year it was. And the same goes for The Rock. You know, so that's not the issue. That's not the, and I like that it is a PG product right now, because I have a hope that my kids are going to watch. I mean, they're already foaming at the mouth because they see daddy watching this TV show that, you know, looks exciting, and I have to tell them every time to leave the room because they're not ready to watch it yet. Yeah. But they will be, and it's going to be awesome, and I'm looking forward to it, because it's just like, you know, when my parents, you know, took me to the Civic Center, I won my first, you know, tickets off of the radio, you know, in '86, and, you know, that's when I got to go, and I got to sit like in almost practically the back row of the Civic Center, right up against the stage. But that was when, you know, the announcers were on the stage, and it was awesome. The first quote unquote performer for WWF that I ever saw in person was Vince McMahon, because he was the one who walked out on stage towards the announcers table, you know, and it was just a cool thing. And it was awesome to just see it live. And as a kid who was only 9-10 years old at the time, you know, I want to be able to see my kids, you know, have that same experience. And the truth is that the way the product was in the Attitude Era, I probably wouldn't have been comfortable bringing my kids around. Doesn't mean that that's not okay for somebody else, but it's just not for me. And so, I think that's what I think ultimately that's kind of the point I'd like to make is don't worry so much about the fact that there's no blood. Don't worry so much about that there's no cursing and that there's no puppies or whatever. We don't need that in order for it to be awesome. It just needs to tell compelling stories that aren't too cheesy. They need to cut down on the backstage segments that look ridiculous because why is there a camera back there? You know what I mean? Recording,
Yeah.
obviously important, conversations between, officials and wrestlers. We don't need that moment.
Yeah.
It just it makes it look clearly fake. You have to have a sense of reality. And when you start doing backstage segments like that, that shouldn't be something that as a viewer you should see, it gives it away and it pulls too much of the curtain back. And I'd like to see that to be gone. And again, just focus on what works, get rid of what doesn't, and just enjoy it as is.
There you go, Josh. I'm sure you could talk hours about this as I could. I'll definitely have you back on because I know it will not stop for what we have to talk about. So, but it's good to hear people's opinions about things and get that solo conversation going. Thanks for joining me on Off the Mark, and I'm sure we'll have you on soon. And hey, thanks a lot, man.
No doubt, man. It was a lot of fun.
All right, awesome. And guys, follow us on Twitter at Marks for Life. You can follow me at Credo. You can join the wrestling group on Facebook. That's facebook.com/group/pro wrestling marks. There's tons of links out there. Go find them. Go enjoy them. And especially this one, facebook.com/off the mark for life. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Here we go!